start her up here. So, can we start off by telling me your name and who are you with?
I'm Evan Harrison, the CEO of Kiss the Ground.
And in a nutshell, what does Kiss the Ground do?
So Kiss the Ground has been around for just over 10 years. And we were formed really when our co-founders first learned about regenerative agriculture practices. They started doing some Google searches and realized there just wasn't much of a conversation around these practices as a viable solution for the climate, water, and health crisis. And they said, hey, well, we're not farmers, we're not scientists, we're not academia, but we can tell the story and raise awareness. So they set out with a really clear mission to awaken people and to the possibilities of regeneration as a viable solution for these challenges, and to start telling stories and education. And then it took about 7 years for Big Ranch Productions, Josh and Rebecca Tickell, who built the film under the same name, Kiss the Ground, to get that film out in 2020, which really put the movement on the map in a very material way.
Well, it certainly did. Tell me, so what are some of the things that you're doing to educate people about the need for regenerative farming?
So we really have three focus areas. We're a storytelling or media content creation or media company. And while the follow-up to the Kiss the Ground film, Common Ground, is going to be released this summer, and then there will be a follow-up to that. It's you've got captive audiences that are really asking for short form content, little sound bites in between. So we have a multi-platform content creation strategy where we tell stories and release them through our social media channels. We have some premium content. We just released a film called Possibilities of Regeneration, which is told from the voice and actually narrated by Lila June Johnston, an indigenous food scholar. And she co-wrote it. And we're going to release, it's an animated short that tells the story from the lens of the indigenous people. And we're going to release a story like that every year in celebration of Earth Month, really focusing on stories that haven't had much attention and haven't been told and really haven't reached the masses. We tell stories of regeneration through the lens of farmers, really telling about their individual journey, why they started really adopting regenerative practices, what the challenges they were facing were and are, and how the regenerative practices have helped really reduce the level of inputs and ultimately increase the yields, while along the same time, producing nutrient-dense products that they're bringing to market. So we're telling stories on an ongoing basis. We're releasing those stories the way different people want to consume them. So we have a TikTok channel now. We're on LinkedIn, which is for business networks. And we're, of course, on Instagram, Facebook. And some people just want to read our newsletters. So we're trying to really get the movement now to the masses through different forms of storytelling. Secondarily, we've always offered educational materials direct to consumer through on-demand learning. We have a course called the Soil Advocate Training Class, and that's been taken by 5,000 people around the globe who have then gone on to start their own initiatives focusing on soil health and regenerative practices. Now we have a whole education program where we're working with small, medium, and even large companies to offer them education packages to help change their company from within. Because a lot of people look at big companies and say, oh, they're part of the problem. And while oftentimes that is true, there are a lot of people at the most senior levels at big companies and at the most, the ground floor who want to change. And it's hard to change big companies. And big companies are coming to us saying, how can you help us with that change? How can you inspire the company the way the film inspired so many? So we have programs for education packages where we do Q&As with our short form content, with our films. We do get your hands in the soil type programs and teach with soil training for companies. And then all the way on down to those on-demand classes where a lot of companies come to us and say, hey, we want to offer all of our employees training. Can you put together a package to do that? So that's education. Of course, there's plenty of free material on our website at kisstheground.com in the education program as well. And then finally, advocacy. Because Kiss the Ground is a name synonymous with the earliest stages of the movement, we've been given a seat at the table in DC, and we're able to really help advocate for policy change. So we've done a lot of work with the upcoming Farm Bill to really impact change.
What are you doing with about the Farm Bill? Like you're approaching legislators and lobbying for certain points of view?
Yeah, so we formed a coalition about a year ago called Regenerate America. And you have 100 companies and individuals who are part of this coalition who have worked diligently to, first of all, make sure we get in the right rooms on both sides of the aisle and present why regenerative practices are accretive for farmers, and while they also solve so many of the problems we have, yet there's a need for funding. So with everybody from Woody Harrelson, who was the narrator of our first film, going to DC and to really share their perspective about why this is such an important matter, we've been a part of a whole bunch of really important meetings, bipartisan, and now bills are being introduced before the cutoff, which I think is about a month away now, that will help really bring regenerative practices into the Farm Bill.
And is it hoped that, do you expect there to be regenerative practices in the Farm Bill?
Absolutely. You know, part of what people react to Kiss the Ground, the film, and what we do day in, day out is inspiration that we're really not approaching it from an angle of there is any one right solution. However, we do believe inclusion and joining the regenerative movement is nothing but a positive step in the right direction. So we don't have a label that we mandate. We simply look for like-minded individuals and companies who want to start the transition towards regeneration, and that's where we provide leadership, information, and guidance to help move in that direction.
What do you see as the main stumbling block to people getting into regenerative ag? Is it lack of knowledge? Is it financial? How do you see it?
Yes, and there are plenty more yeses. While the holistic approach to farming just makes so much sense on so many levels, it's complex to take a business model that has worked a certain way for so many years with government subsidies and change that model. So it takes a lot of conversation and a lot of education and a lot of willingness to overcome the obstacles that are in place. When something has worked a certain way for dozens and dozens of years with lots of funding behind it working a certain way, it takes a lot of conversation and a lot of change to undo the processes that have been set in place.
Does global warming, climate change have much to do with influencing people to get into regenerative ag who haven't been?
We just did some research, and not surprisingly, the words climate change are often still viewed as divisive. So therefore, when you have a conversation and you talk about drought or flooding, when you have a conversation, you talk about the ways everybody has been affected by, whether you call it climate change or you call it something else, when you talk about how on a human level we've all been affected by what is clearly changing, lots of heads start to nod. When you talk about wellness and issues based on either lack of nutrition or some of the side effects of whether it's glyphosate or whatever you're adding in the system we have in place, you get a lot of head nods. We also found through our research that 68% of the US adult population over the course of the last year has purchased products that are non-GMO or organic, or said another way, they have purchased products that they feel are better for their well-being and their wellness.
Hmm. Um, would you say that regenerative ag can be as profitable as corporate ag?
It's been proven. It's been proven. When the film came out, there were about, I think, 30 million acres. And we can follow back up with you on the stats because I'm just shooting from the hip here. There were about 30 million acres under regenerative practice, or I'm sorry, I got the numbers wrong. I have to circle back to you on the numbers. It was about 250,000 acres with regenerative practice before the film. Now, Understanding Ag has helped guide about 30 million acres just since the film came out. And part of it is to make sure that there is a decrease in inputs, so there's money being saved there, and then there's an increase in outputs. So you had farms reporting pretty quickly within a year or two massive savings and more net profitability. So absolutely, I believe that is an opportunity, and that's a part of the process. What I will say, which also goes back to the challenges, though, is no two farms are the same. You can have two farms that are a couple miles away from one another, and there's a little bit of trial and error for a whole host of reasons. So that's why we talk about in regenerative agriculture practices, context being so important.
Is one of the roadblocks on the national scheme of ag the subsidies given to farmers that they've gotten used to and don't want to switch gears?
That's absolutely one of the challenges, and that's why we're working on the advocacy level for the Farm Bill to help address some of that.
You're saying that you do bite-sized stories on social media. When people see you on social media, do they already have an interest in regenerative ag, or do they come to you through other means and then get an interest in it?
Understanding regeneration as a viable solution for climate, wellness, water, all these complex issues is really brand new. Only 4% of the adult population in the US really has a grasp as to the basic principles of regenerative agriculture. So we're bringing in new people through a whole host of channels on an ongoing basis. And what we've found is we are bringing in people to our website to learn, and for some of these free resources for the first time, to the tune of 95% of the people who are coming in for the first time. So we're really in the earliest stages of this movement, moving towards mainstream. And one of the things that's going to help the movement gain traction is you have now nearly 600 entities talking about regenerative agriculture practices, whereas in 2019, that number was closer to 200. So more and more companies are talking now about where products are being sourced from and playing a part as a responsible company in that solution.
Let's see my questions here. What is your thoughts about the value of indigenous knowledge? And I'm working with a master forest gardener from Belize, and he has a lot. And would you say much of this comes from indigenous knowledge?
Absolutely. We just released a story, as I'd mentioned, called Possibilities of Regeneration. And it's all about shining a light on the story of regenerative practices, dating back to the indigenous voice and the indigenous perspective. I think it's incredibly important that we continue to learn from those who practice various forms of what we today call regenerative agriculture, and then adding in the science elements. So we're measuring the soil to make sure it's becoming healthier as we try these different approaches based on the context.
Are you familiar with the MILPA system of that's in Belize, of different tiered of plants to shade each other, and they're actually on a 20-year cycle of growing trees and then harvesting them after 20 years for building materials. Are you familiar with that at all?
I am not, and it sounds incredibly logical and inspirational. What I am vastly aware of is, the success in having multi-crop approaches with live animals grazing and just the holistic natural approach. So I love hearing about different stories of how things have worked in different regions over time.
Let's see here. Looking at my questions, you've covered a lot of good ground there.
Excellent.
Where are the farmers that you work with? Are they mainly in Southern California or throughout the country?
We made a while 10 years ago we were pretty Southern California centric, because that's where the founders of our organization were at the time. We've really spread out across the United States. And as we start talking to farmers and creating content with farmers, we make sure to capture different scenarios on not only on both coasts, but the South, as well as the Midwest, because each territory is so drastically different. So we have a range of hundreds of farmers we've worked with across the US. And while we have done some work outside of the US, we've really chosen to focus our attention on making sure we have a nice array of different scenarios where we go deep and get to tell those stories across the US.
Is food sovereignty an issue that you have dealt with and are aware of?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so for those that don't know, how would you describe that issue?
It's a complex issue, and really, at the highest level, what I'm so excited about as I hear the stories of farms that have started to embrace regenerative practices is how, number one, it brings in the local community, and number two, there is more selection of more produce and just more nutrient opportunities that are coming right from that region. So it's at the highest level incredibly rewarding when you hear those stories and how it affects the local community at that level.
Yeah, I think one thing a lot of people are not aware of is how monoculture farming has decimated a lot of small communities, and they've fallen apart. And that in itself is one of the many reasons. Would you agree to help with regenerative farming to bring small communities back and people's investment in their farms?
That's a big part of the process, is being able to source more locally with less reliance on shipping.
Any thoughts about big companies like General Mills and others kind of getting on the regenerative bandwagon? I guess they're doing it because that's what their customers want.
Yeah, I've spent about half of my career working for very large companies. And what I've found in my approach to this is instead of immediately saying, oh, this is a greenwashing play, the way I look at it is big companies are beholden to shareholders, as you pointed out. And there are also people who want to do the right thing. It's also hard to change big companies that have operated a certain way for a certain period of time. I choose to speak with the people at every company who approaches us and hear, why they're reaching out and what they're looking to accomplish. And you can pretty quickly get a sense as to whether people are in it for the right reasons and whether a company is in it for the right reasons with good intention. And we're very much playing the role of we are an inclusive voice in the movement. And really a company of any size, if it has people who really want to do the right thing for the right reasons, we want to work with them. And while it's difficult to really change the way a big company behaves, when it starts to shift, the impact is exponential because there's so much reach and so much buying power. So that's an incredibly exciting opportunity from my perspective.
Nice. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to the mix here?
No, Larry, really, I thought we were just going to have, I thought you were in the earliest stages of creating. You just wanted to kind of compare notes. I didn't necessarily think it was going to be more like, hey, can we film it and use pieces of it? I'm totally fine with the latter. I would just ask, I'm not sure who connected us. Did you just reach out on LinkedIn or?
I think I did. Yeah. I think a couple people said I should reach out to you, but I couldn't find any methods. And so it was one of your forms I filled out on one of the websites.
Oh yeah, it was through the, that makes sense. And somebody on my team probably said, Evan, this one's for you. So I'm going to give you 2 emails here.
Great.
Nathan is our head of corporate communications, marketing. We're a small company. There's 20 of us, but copying me and sending a note to Nathan, fact checking anything we discussed, would be encouraged, and I'd appreciate it. Especially because I wasn't expecting it to be live and tape. But again, I'm very comfortable with it. So I would appreciate that, number one. And number two, if there's any data you need that we did not discuss, Nathan can help provide it, as well as content, if that's of interest to you. We create a lot of our own content. So as you're pulling together the pieces, we'd be happy to help you out and participate there.
Well, it's very kind. We really appreciate it. And we'll take you up on that.
I understand what you're up against, and we'd love to help out in any way we can, Larry.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. You're doing great work, and thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for what you're doing, Larry.
Okay, my pleasure.
See ya.
See ya.